Donald Trump wasn't at the Supreme Court today for arguments on his claim of presidential immunity, but he had a very, very good day there. Here's Justice Neil Gorsuch.
So why couldn't he be prosecuted for leading a civil rights protest in front of the Capitol that delays a vote on a piece of important legislation?
So I think what you need to do is run through all of the very president-specific protective layers of analysis.
In other words, the Justice Department of whoever the president who is sitting is decides what they should and should not charge a former president with. That went over like a ton of bricks at the Supreme Court today. Here's Tom Dupree predicting as much yesterday on the show.
I think we will get a ruling before the election. The Supreme Court will decide this case before it adjourns for the summer, that is to say by the end of June. But it may not fully decide the issue. In other words, what the Supreme Court could say is that, well, there is some degree of presidential immunity, but we're not quite certain of the contours of it, how it applies to Trump's case. So we're going to send this case back to the lower courts to figure out whether some of these charges do fall within the scope of immunity, which could string things out dramatically.
Tom's back with us, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in a slightly darker suit. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you.
After today's arguments, are you more confident in your prediction?
I am more confident in my prediction. Look, that's where the justices clearly were angling. They were very receptive to the Trump defense team today, their arguments that the president enjoys some degree of immunity while in office from criminal prosecution. But the thing that was being debated was, well, how far does that immunity extend? Does it extend to the president's core functions? Does it extend beyond it? So it looks to me like the way this is getting teed up is for the Supreme Court to decide this case by announcing a broad rule of constitutional law, but then sending the case back to the lower courts to actually apply that rule in the Trump case.
Okay, so they apply that rule in the Trump case. Does that mean we get a trial in the Trump case before November?
Very unlikely. Very unlikely. I think the process of trying to parse out, well, what charges brought by the special counsel fall within the scope of immunity and which fall outside the scope of immunity, that's not something that could be done in a day. That's something that would probably require argument, evidence, consideration by a judge, and in all likelihood would push this trial date past the election.
You can often tell a lot about how people view things by the reaction. And obviously the justices don't give interviews, but everybody listened to it. Here is some of the reaction on MSNBC. Take a listen.
We're talking about the scope of presidential power. We're talking about the nature of separation of powers. We're at the heart of American democracy right now. So we're watching this and it's high drama, but it's also happening against the backdrop of protest all throughout the country. The first time we've ever seen a president in a courthouse, right, held. So this is really American democracy in the balance.
And what is going to come out of that is if the Supreme Court does not allow a trial before November, then the Supreme Court has destroyed American democracy, or have they protected it?
Well, I think the justices in the majority think they would protect it. They were very concerned today about allowing charges against a former president to go forward precisely for that reason. What sort of precedent would that establish? Are we going to be in a nation where new presidents come in and immediately begin prosecuting their predecessors? Again, the Supreme Court was worried about that concern, and a lot of their questions seemed designed to really push the government a bit to assuage them that that wasn't really going to be a problem.
One of those was from Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Take a listen.
How about President Obama's drone strikes?
So the Office of Legal Counsel looked at this very carefully and determined that, number one, the federal murder statute does apply to the executive branch. The president wasn't personally carrying out the strike, but the aiding and abetting laws are broad. And it determined that a public authority exception that's built into statutes and that applied particularly to the murder statute, because it talks about unlawful killing, did not apply to the drone strike.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on television. But that sounds an awful lot like the Department of Justice saying, trust us.
Yeah, it's basically saying the Department of Justice is going to opine on what actions would be legal and what would be illegal, and then the president can act accordingly. But I think the difficulty with that is presidents face thousands and thousands of decisions almost on a daily basis, and they can't expect to go and get a legal opinion in advance as to whether every one of those decisions would be lawful.
Right, and a new president and a new Justice Department could look at
do
something.
Do a 180.
Right.
Say we have a different view of it.
Right. All right. Hey, congratulations on a correct prediction. Thank you. We enjoy having people back when they're right. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.